Welcome to clip number 3 of the MSO 2017 Education Week pre-concert resources. In clip number 2, we talked about call and response, and we focused in on the piece of music Bass and Street Blues. In clip number 3, we're going to talk more about the kind of skills that orchestral musicians need to work together with a soloist, and particularly a jazz soloist. What kind of things do they need to be changing about their playing? We'll also talk about the conductor and the soloist working together. Now, I'm a conductor, and I can tell you about this relationship between conductor and soloist, because my job is basically to be the conduit between the soloist and the musicians of the orchestra. I use my hands to try and synchronize everybody in rhythm, but I'm also trying to show other things like balances when things are too loud and too soft. I'm also listening very hard to the soloist to know exactly where he is in terms of the form of the music, so that I know when to cue the musicians of the orchestra. And because we're bringing two worlds together, the conductor's role is something of an interpreter or a translator. I'm trying to teach the orchestra a little bit about the jazz style in rehearsal so that they know how to swing rhythms and they know how to play with the same kind of style that James Morrison is playing with. And that brings these two worlds together. In terms of performing as a group, there are many, many ensemble skills that all of the musicians are constantly aware of, and they all come down to one thing, and that is listening to each other. So the things that bring an ensemble together are firstly rhythm, and in this concert we've got a rhythm section that James is playing with, and they could play by themselves actually, and sometimes they do in the concert, of drums, guitar, bass, and James as the soloist. We then add to that the entire orchestra. So the main rhythmic element is the drums. So when the drums are playing, everybody is listening to the drums as their rhythmic guide, including me. And the drummer and I have a very, very close relationship. We're also listening to the balance of the instruments. So if certain things are sticking out of the texture or are too loud, or certain things can't be heard, we need to be sensitive to those things and adjust accordingly. There are so many other ensemble skills that musicians do automatically, like playing in tune, phrasing things in the same way, and particularly in this case, as I mentioned, trying to capture the style of jazz. If there is a sense of swing, or just the weighting of the notes, which notes need to be accented more than others, and the kinds of things that don't often get written down very accurately in a classical score or part of music for the orchestra. And now, why don't we meet one of the MSO musicians, violinist Freya Franzen. One of the elements of jazz that makes it so unique is the rhythm of swing. And I thought we'd demonstrate something with the help of Freya Franzen here on the violin. This is a piece that was written in the 17th century, years and years ago in the Baroque period, by a French composer called Charpentier, and it's called a Te Deum. It's something that you may have heard before, to be honest. It used to be, well, I still think it is the Eurovision theme, which is pretty exciting. This melody is written down in straight quavers. It has no swing rhythm at all. And when played as it's written down, it sounds like this. Often in jazz, the quavers, da-da-dee-da, will be swung, and it'll sound like a skipping kind of rhythm, much like this. So that's not written down, but it's just a style that we can apply to a piece of music that exists already. And all of a sudden it sounds slightly jazzy, although I have to say they used to swing it back in the Baroque days as well. So jazz hasn't been the first to invent swing. So that's essentially the difference between straight eighth notes or quavers and swing quavers. Freya, tell us about your background. How did you choose the violin?
Well, actually, it wasn't really that much to do with the violin. It was to do with my best friend when I was 6.
That's always the way.
I just copied her and launched myself into violin playing.
You're trying to just keep up with your best friend.
Pretty much, yeah.
How long did you continue in primary school? Did you play all through primary school?
I actually started school at an infant school, which was just Kinder 1 and 2. So my teacher there was wonderful, whom I studied with for a long time. She made violin playing really fun and interesting for us. We had our individual lessons, and then we'd also have group lessons, which included lots of musical games and stuff. So,
well, that is something that I think all of the musicians have in common, is a great teacher.
Yeah.
And when was it that you decided that violin was something you wanted to pursue as a career?
when I did a national music camp when I was about 14 or 15, that really changed everything. I got very excited about playing music with other people and the whole music scene.
Now we're in a situation where you're going to be working with James Morrison, one of the great multi-instrumentalists, a jazz legend. I know you normally would play music from the classical repertoire. This is jazz. So what kind of things change when you've got a soloist like James Morrison and he walks into the room and starts playing?
Sure. Well, for starters, he's very loud.
That's true. When he plays trumpet, particularly.
In the way that, like, if we're playing with a classical violinist, we often have to really be quite sensitive in how we accompany them. Someone like James, you know, we can play, you know, with quite comfortably.
I bet. And so the style of jazz is different, requires a different set of skills. How much of that do you pick up just from listening to James, and how much is stuff that you've learned earlier in your own research?
Every musician plays differently, so we will pick up cues from him when we're playing with him, but in order to know the sort of style and how to go into a rehearsal ready, you need to do a bit of research. You need to do some listening, preferably to him, but just in the style of, and work out how the strings are complementing his sound. And
what's it like being on stage in a concert? What does that feel like when you're actually performing?
For a long time, I suffered from pretty crippling nerves, and so my first forays into orchestral playing were quite nerve-wracking, but now that I'm in the job and we're performing, 3 times a week or so, it's a lot more exciting. So I can really hone in on that sort of adrenaline and use it to my benefit now, which is a lot nicer, actually.
I bet, and being in the moment. And I guess like all things, it comes with experience. You can't just expect to all of a sudden be feeling immediately comfortable on stage, and these things come with time. But Freya, it's so good to talk to you. Thank you for sharing all your insights with us.
Ben, no problem.
So now that we've met an MSO musician and we've talked about what it's like to play in a big group and be on stage, it's time for you to go back and revise your call and response activities. Work out responses to the Basin Street Blues piece that we're going to be performing on stage, and the MSO and I and James can't wait to see you.